Yes, I was in high school in the 70s. In the 70s, there was marches for the language, there was land marches. Māori were becoming very active. There were protests against people mocking the haka. And the tour to South Africa in terms of the Cavaliers was one thing. When they came to New Zealand in the early 80s, there was all of this political upheaval, and sometimes Māori who were pushing back against all of this were seen as activists. Many of my friends' parents were activists. That activity kind of further built up, so I studied it in my third form year, translation now, year 9. In that first year of high school, we looked closer at the treaty. So that gave me some opportunity to reflect about, while I might not have heard the words Te Tiriti, I heard what it was all about all my life. The only kind of time that I'd ever heard about the treaty was when I started looking into who I was. So in that learning journey, in terms of discovering my heritage, discovering my whakapapa, it's sort of an irony that it took learning my language to learn about the treaty. Learning the language, I was with a number of people who had made the decision or made a commitment to learn the language, to become fluent in our reo. And so we all were on that journey together. And so when it came to looking at the treaty and what that meant for many of us, there were a lot of different reactions to learning all those things. Some, of course, was anger. Some was pouty or sad about some of this stuff. Some of us made conscious decisions that we wanted to look a little bit more in depth into some of that history and understand why some of that happened and why for so long many of us hadn't been given or taught or allowed to be exposed to that sort of history.
My grandmother actually used to go to a lot of huis with papawai, and she did a lot of things to do with getting the land back, and along with a lot of other things. I did an essay about it a couple of years ago, about how colonisation had affected New Zealand. Well, the thing that caught my eye was the national law, but it was mostly aimed towards Māori, and that really, that made me very passionate about justice towards that. I decided that I wanted to go study that, wanted to do a Bachelor in Indigenous Studies and Law, so hopefully one day I can get rid of some of the laws that we have against us.
Oh yeah, it was that first lesson at school when my mate asked me, oh, why don't you Māori just be happy with what you have? So I went home and asked Mum. Mum was always my political landscape. She was all of our political landscape for us. When we lived in the South Island, away from home, away from WAIRARAPA, we were often gathered around the TV when something was going on as a protest movement, and Bastion Point was one. I was only 6 years old when that happened, and I remember my mother crying at the TV. So I go home and ask her, Mum, should we be satisfied? Why are Māori always protesting for things? Shouldn't they be satisfied with what they have? Like, genuine, I want to know, Mum. And then she lays it out, the whole thing. Well, as much as that she knew at the time, which was pretty much the whole thing. She worked in the education department at the time. That was when I was aware of what the breaches of the treaty were. It wasn't until I got to Kohanga Reo that I really understood the crafting and the social engineering of central and local government into the lives of our people. I went to work for the Ministry of Ed after being a teacher, and I found this document. It was a book, and it said these words. It was a research into the Native Schools Act and its establishment here in Aotearoa. And in 1867, they passed legislation that said, when they discussed it, that the time has come to decide whether to exterminate the natives or to civilise them. But if we are to civilise them, we need to do so through a language that is more conducive to human thought. And so they literally outlawed the use of Te Reo Māori in schools. It wasn't just by strap. That happened in the 50s when they came back after the war. That happened to my mother at Te Whiti school. And our people stopped speaking Te Reo to our children here in WAIRARAPA to protect them from the strap of their school teachers, who by now were widely using the cane. But in the native schools establishment, the early native schools advisors who went around the country were asked to ask the teachers not to use so much corporal punishment on these Māori children, or their parents wouldn't send them to your school. And yet the language of the colonising oppressor was used to oppress our children through caning, through strapping, through telling them that they could only be taught cooking, cleaning, labouring and nursemaiding as a profession. And then all our young boys were in the fields by the time they were 10, 11, 12. All our young women were cleaning, doing housework, and that was their pathway.
Prior to this being Te Kura Kaupapa Māori or WAIRARAPA, it was Masterton School, and I began my schooling here in probably 1969. And I guess I learned about the treaty almost straight away, because I noticed we were different once I started school. I got treated different, I felt different. But then I came from a marae style sort of upbringing and Cameron block upbringing to the new place called school, where we had, I think, 600 students here at one part, and I was just one little bit of a pie. I felt really different then. So I learnt about the treaty here at Masterton School, and I learnt at Hiona Intermediate. I met a fine man called Mike Hollings at Hiona Intermediate, and I think he started instilling what the treaty meant, you know, what it means to all of us. When I was 11, I participated in the 1975 march with Dame Whina Cooper, and Whina's actually my nickname, but it's only because of Josephine, not Whina Cooper. And so I was part of that walk. I walked from Queen Elizabeth Park to Waingawa Bridge. We walked to the bridge, and then a few of us walked back, and I just remember turning around satisfied that I'd been part of a really important march. Yeah, the treaty is the founding document of this country, and I know and I understand why it was, it became, you know, we had to. I just know that the treaty wasn't honoured as it possibly could have been. Yeah, I feel there's a change coming on, Corin. But I'm nearly 60. I'm banging on the door of 60, and it just feels like yesterday I started learning about the treaty.